Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, mandatory gifts, Pokemon and a gem-compatible starters, welcome to the final episode of the Minimal Pokemon Challenge. This is the fourth and final part of this challenge, and here we will be covering every applicable game I have not yet gone through in one of the previous three parts, which you should watch if you haven't, as they'll be heavily spoiled right about now. Our list now contains 24 Pokemon, or 28 not including glitches, the very smallest number you could have by going through one game from each generation up to the 7th. But by the end of this video, we'll finally have the magical number we've spent all this time searching for. So, let's get the show on the road. You've seen the length of this video, we've got a lot of ground to cover. Once and for all, let's finally answer the question: how many Pokemon do you need to beat the Pokémon franchise? Okay, so first and foremost, to fix the most important error in the previous video. Much better. Seriously though, one of the most asked questions in the past 3 videos were about the games I hadn't included in the original plan. For example, the Let's Go remakes and Legends Arceus. Originally, I only wanted to cover the mainline games, both to save some effort, but also because they looked like the best ones to apply this challenge to. But if this is really gonna be the final video, I really shouldn't leave any stone unturned. So, as a special treat for all the support in the past videos, I am officially adding 4 new games to the plan. And yeah, this will inevitably result in more Pokemon on the list, but hey, what's like 8 more Pokemon, right? Right? These won't have too many Pokemon, right? Please don't do the cutaway gag again. So, where best to start our recap than all the way back in Generation 3, and the true proper debut of the franchise in a home console. That's right, it's Pokémon Colosseum for the Nintendo GameCube. As something of a sequel to the Pokémon Stadium spin-off series, its spot in the mainline franchise is somewhat contested, but it was also the first game to focus primarily on double battles. Consequently, that means that it's very unlikely that we'll be able to go through this one with just one Pokemon. And the very beginning of the game doesn't waste time. The main character Wes starts right off the bat owning 2 Pokemon, Umbreon and Espeon. And while technically we never got to catch or receive them, they do still count, so we begin with 2 Pokemon under our belt. At its core, this game is all about snagging Pokemon. While in the main games it's impossible to catch other trainers' Pokemon, in this one you're actively trying to rescue shadow Pokemon that show up during battles. However, at no point are you actually forced to rescue these Pokemon. In fact, you can actually skip each and every shadow Pokemon, despite how it goes against the very premise of the game. And so, even if it isn't long until we're presented with our first chances to snag a Pokemon, we of course reject them, keeping both our evolutions as the only members of our party. The battles aren't so bad, in a way they're even easier than at normal playthroughs. We don't need to be careful about defeating shadow Pokemon too quickly since we're never trying to snag them. Even the fight with Mirror B goes completely effortlessly, which isn't anything to sneeze at. And after saving Duking's Plusle from the dancing menace himself, we are given a rather special reward, a Plusle. Duking ever so kindly gives us his Plusle, and without a prompt to decline it, the lowest amount of Pokemon needed to beat Pokémon Colosseum has just increased by 1. And speaking of unfortunate events, there's another thing I want to touch on. I mentioned that the battles at the start of the game were pretty easy, and they remained that way for a fair bit. But assuming that since we have returned to an earlier generation, that means that over-leveling is not the norm once again, and battles return to being trivial is being hasty at best. Umbreon and Espeon's synergy is pretty self-explanatory. Umbreon's a tank, and Espeon's a damage dealer, and they both do their jobs pretty well. Even Plusle packs a fair punch considering it gets boosted experience from being a traded Pokemon, and as such grows faster. The issue is that in the grand scheme of things, Umbreon's bulk doesn't matter. Okay, let me explain. The way the opponent AI works most of the time in this game is pretty simple. Outside of turns where it buffs itself or in fixed status, it's programmed to select the move that does the most damage. Umbreon's defenses are impressive, which means it overall doesn't take much damage from even super effective attacks. The side effect of this is the AI then prioritizes attacking Espeon or Plusle instead, so essentially in most fights, especially past the halfway point of the game, Espeon and Plusle are taking the brunt of the damage, and since their bulk isn't nearly as solid as Umbreon's, they fade in just a couple of hits. This is especially a problem in this game because of the focus on double battles. These primarily damage-dealing Pokémon are taking hits from 2 Pokémon every turn, so they usually don't survive past the first turn without fainting. What does this mean in practice? Lots of backtracking to healing machines. In boss battles, Umbreon would often have to face 2 Pokémon alone, which he impressively was able to, taking advantage of Toxic, Confuseray and Moonlight to stall out entire teams, with a bit of help from some item spam. And in terms of over-leveling, surprisingly in the final battle of the game, all 3 of my Pokémon were 5 levels lower than the boss. Though this part I'll attribute to my skipping of the optional Colosseums that unlock while I progress through the game. I mostly forgot about these and as such missed out on a fair amount of experience, though I was able to pull through thanks to Umbreon's incredible bulk and utility. Seriously, I assume many of us, underestimated Umbreon as the worst of the 2 starters of this game. But the amount of battles Umbreon was able to single-handedly save all by his lonesome generally made me consider this unassuming little... cat? Dog? Yeah. Oh, right, and I guess it's the end of Pokémon Colosseum. With no mandatory snags throughout the whole game, our 2 starters and the mandatory gift Pokémon are all that's needed to beat the game, increasing our count by 3. Fast forward 5 years, and a whole another story envelops in the land of Ori. Pokémon XD Gales of Darkness, the second Generation 3 game we skipped back in our first go-through. And while it shares a lot of traits with its predecessor, like being focused on double battles, there are some things that set it apart. For example, the main protagonist of this game, Michael, only starts with a single Eevee. And yet, as I just mentioned, double battles are the norm in Ori. So where's Eevee's partner? The answer is the first encounter with a snaggable Pokémon, Teddiursa. Unlike the entirety of Colosseum, you are forced to snag this Pokémon, or you can't move on from the battle. And so that makes it the second Pokémon for this game, and the first Shadow Pokémon for this challenge. And soon after that, we meet this man who offers us with the items we need to evolve our Eevee into any of the 5 forms available in this generation. I had already used Umbreon and Espeon in the previous game, and so I decided to pick a new evolution for this game. So did I pick the tough and reliable Vaporeon, or was I more interested in the faster and more aggressive style of Jolteon? Well, I got a bit creative. Now, I don't think I'm being especially controversial by claiming Flareon is the least liked evolution, and competitively, it has certainly not made a big impact to say the least. So why did I pick it, despite all that? 3 reasons. Reason number 1, Flareon's cute. It's not my favorite evolution, but it doesn't mean I don't like its design. Reason number 2, specifically because it's considered the worst evolution, it will allow me to check if this game is beatable in the worst possible condition with the least amount of Pokemon possible. And reason number 3, I unironically think Flareon might be the perfect pick for this challenge. Remember one of the main issues in Colosseum being that the bulk difference between Espeon and Umbreon causing all the damage to pile onto the damage dealer? Well, one of Flareon's only good points is his special defense, while its physical bulk is quite poor. Ursaring, on the other hand, has balanced defenses, which make it so that most physical attacks will land on Flareon, and most special ones will target Ursaring. This guarantees some level of damage distribution, which all but made the problem vanish during this playthrough. Another thing that vanished during this playthrough was most of the difficulty from the first game. Flareon and Ursaring are just an impressive duo. Flareon's solid attack stat results in a mini Shadow Ball, and its flamethrower is perfectly serviceable for what it needs to do. On the other hand, Ursaring has the move Return right when it gets purified, and it would be another statement to say that this single move carried me through the whole game. Needless to say, a full power stab return of a base 130 attack stat is as strong of a move as it gets, and with coverage moves like Brick Break and Earthquake, I just had to slap Protect onto Flareon to have near perfect coverage. And as I mentioned, the problem I had in Colosseum, where one of the Pokemon was being the target of all the attacks, was completely negated by the distributed bulk. It also helped that there aren't nearly as many optional battles in this game, which meant I didn't accidentally skip on a lot of experience. It was much more reminiscent of the Generation 3 I remembered, where most battles took only a few turns and my Pokémon stood comfortably above the level curve by about 10 levels or so. And turns out that, aside from the very first Shadow Pokémon, no other snags are forced throughout the entire game, and the final boss was pretty easy, all things considered. Despite Ursaring getting knocked out at one point, Flareon managed to pull through, and Pokémon XD gets a 2 Pokémon clear, which I guess is as good as it can get for a double battle focused game. So, that's the 2 Generation 3 games we skipped. We are now good to fast forward all the way back to where we left off. Okay, what's the next game? Oh no! No! Okay, so next up we have Sword and Shield, and... Alright, look, I'm gonna be honest. Pokemon Let's Go and Pikachu and Eevee are the final boss of this challenge. I will get to them, I promise, but I'd rather delay them as much as I can. So, with that ominous foreshadowing out of the way, we are finally ready to sail into a new generation, Generation 8, starting with the main games, Pokemon Sword and Shield. We are once more free to choose whichever starters we want, so I went to the Fire-type Scorbunny, so we have an easier time against the first Grass-type gym. That's because, unsurprisingly, we need all the help we can get. Just like the previous main series games, after the introduction of the buff the XP share, we are going to be receiving a great deal less experience than we're supposed to, due to the fact that we have only 1 Pokemon on our team, as opposed to 6, as I explained in the last episode. Until I'm forced to catch something else, I'm essentially playing with the XP share off, which as you can imagine isn't exactly a walk in the park. Still, the beginning section of the game passes without much trouble. As expected, the first gym is trivial when taking into account the type advantage. With that, you might think that picking Scorbunny as a starter was a wise choice. But as it turns out, I'd forgotten one very important fact: the type of the second gym. So let me walk you through exactly why this battle is so annoying. First, Rabbit's moves. Considering Fight-type moves aren't going to be doing much damage, we only have 2 choices for attacks: Tackle and Double Kick. None of these are good enough to take any of the opponent's Pokemon down nearly as fast as I need, so we need to fall back to X items, which incidentally have been buffed last generation to raise stats by 2 stages. Luckily these are very accessible to us since we crossed the wild area, so you might think our problems are solved. But they're just getting started. Second, the Goldeen. As unbelievable as it might seem, the Goldeen that starts the battle has to be in the top percentage of Goldeens. That's because its Water-type move is Water Pulse, which has Confusion as a likely side effect. For those who don't know, self-damage from Confusion scales with the affected Pokemon's attack, so you can see how from the very beginning the scales are tipped against us. But okay, eventually I'll get lucky enough to land a hit through Confusion, and 1 hit is all it takes. Third, the Aerocuda. The worrying move with this one is Aqua Jet. Not only does it deal a good chunk of damage, it always goes first. So even if you heal before going for the KO, it will always land 2 hits, which leaves Raboot in a precarious state against the 4th and last barrier. Probably the most obvious threat is the Dreadnought, especially when it Dynamaxes straight away. Even if we do have a super effective move in our arsenal, max moves damage scale off the base damage of the moves they're based on, and because Double Kick hits twice, its base power is actually a measly 30, which turns it to 100 when powered up. That might sound not too shabby, but in practice that translates into this. And needless to say, we can't take even a single hit back. That's not particularly surprising when you take into account that Raboot's a single level higher than the Dreadnought. Yeah, the level scaling has really gotten out of hand. At this point 5 generations ago we'd be at least 10. That is the collection of headaches we need to get through to get past the second gym. And taking them individually, they might not seem too hard, but finding out how to beat all of them took a lot of trial and error. It wasn't quite Totem Araquanid levels of effort, but it was still painful. As it turns out, the best way to surmount this particular challenge was grind for levels. Max raid battles turned out to be an absolute lifesaver in their generous distribution of candies, which allowed me to easily raise Rebute's level from 25 to 32. Coupled with 2 X attacks at the start of the battle, I can take out the Goldeen with 1 double kick, confusion allowing. Dynamaxing at the Arrokuda, I can take it out with a single Max Knuckle, which grants me a third and final attack boost. With +5 to my attack, a single Max Knuckle can take out the Dynamax Dreadnought, and the second gym fight is history. Fast forward a bit, and we're now at the third gym. In this one, we face a difficulty quite unlike any we've faced so far. This gym's challenge requires us to get 5 points battling wild Pokémon. Defeating them gives us 1 point, while catching them is 2. The latter option is obviously blocked to me, so I had to slowly defeat the wild Pokémon, which was more time consuming than it appears, since you also need to defeat the trainer that fights them with you so they don't steal the KO. All in all, it isn't difficult, just boring. The fight against Cabo himself isn't anything to write home about, so finishing off the last member of the first trio of gyms goes pretty smoothly. Let's skip ahead a bit. Bee and Opal's gyms aren't anything to write home about. So next we have... oh no, not again. So, guess what? Gordy's Barbaracle uses Shell Smash right at the start of the battle. And yeah, there's no way Cinderace is living through that. It's the absolute worst starting Pokemon we could have. Even though I saved double kick all this time, it isn't able to KO even if with a -2 defense drop. At this point, a wise person would go and grind some levels. The solution ended up being stocking up on X defenses, and spending the start of the fight setting up our bulk to handle the incoming barrage. Of course, Razor Shell has a 50% chance to drop defense, so the whole process is excruciating. But eventually, after plenty of restarts, and making Cinderace hold the Bright Powder for some lucky misses, we are able to withstand the attacks for long enough that we can tank them and take down the Barbaracle. After that, it's smooth sailing. Our defense is sky high, so there's not much we can take. In hindsight, I probably should have Dynamax right at the start to take out the threat right away, but not doing that allowed the rest of the fight to progress more smoothly. Regardless, that's another huge threat taken care of. So that was a lot of work, and just to get the 6th badge. At least we can rest assured the next gym won't be that much trouble considering it's a dark type. No, instead of challenging, it's actually impossible. Welcome to the 2 Pokemon barrier of this game. The whole gym is blocked behind this one, so with no other option available, we have to call on a friend from Pokemon Home. Having done that, I am able to get through this roadblock and find out why he was even there in the first place. One of the gym trainer fights is a double battle, so the game stops you from even starting the gym with less than 2 Pokemon. The gym itself isn't hard, so I soon leave Spikemuth with the 7th badge, and the last gym comes up not too late after that. The fight with Raihan himself is also a mandatory double battle, but we have our second Pokemon in tow already, which also helps against Raihan's ground and rock type centric strategy. I'm glad I won't have to go through that with Cinderace again. The final battles of the game all come one after the other, and just before the final battle with the champion Leon, we take care of the Eternatus problem in our way. Unfortunately, knocking it out is not enough, and the game doesn't let you move on to the literal final battle in the entire thing until you catch it. The don't catch option is grayed out, which makes throwing the Pokeball the singular way forward. And, as I pointed out, there's a single fight after this, after which our romp through Galar is done. Eternatus joins Reshiram as catches that you are forced to take right at the end, adding up to 2 new Pokemon on the list. Moving swiftly on, next we have the last remake released up to this point, Pokémon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. Now that glitches are out of the picture, all the fancy tricks we used last time won't work anymore, so all we have left is playing the game how it was intended. Sadly, as we saw back when we played through the original Gen 4 games, this means going through most of our journey with only 1 Pokemon, and then being forced to catch one right near the end. Well, at least the gems, one of the main challenges the first time around, aren't an issue anymore. You can call for the help of wild Pokemon, so you don't have to run any gems on your team. And that means that I can take any starter, so I chose Turtwig. And what are the odds I regret this decision almost immediately? Turns out pretty high. So first of all, our experience woes are back once again. I think this is the game I felt it the most. A lot of times I'd be lucky to be more than 3 levels ahead of Pokemon from normal trainers, never mind gym leaders. And it's not like I'm skipping fights, I've been doing all the battles along the routes that I cross. Then there's the Turtwig line itself. The issue is their speed. They are constantly going second, and that means taking lots of chip damage. Couple that with Grass Ground not being very good against the plentiful flying and bug types, even with access to Curse as a way to tank physical hits, sprinkle a little bit of Razor Leaf being its best physical move on top, and you get a pick that I start regretting just late enough that it wouldn't be efficient to start over and pick Chimchar. It's not as bad as Greninja was back in X and Y, but back then I had 2 Pokemon to work with. Here I have to make do with just 1. There's not much different here aside from the difficulty, so I'll fast forward to the fights that gave me most trouble. Most battles to the first leg of the journey weren't too bad, with the first 2 gyms not providing too many headaches. No, the first hair-pulling experience of this playthrough came at the hands of Team Plasma admin Jupiter. The fight with Mars back at the Valley Windworks wasn't too bad, but this one is on a whole other level. First, the leading Zubat as Poison Fang, fresh out of his Gen 6 buff of having a 50% chance to badly poison. Being its only super effective move, it will be using it a lot, which basically means Grottle is permanently poisoned at this point. It's also permanently confused, because of course the Zubat has Supersonic too, which hurts extra bad when I'm using Curse to try and stack up my attack through all this. And I need every attack buff I can get, not only because my best move against it is Bite, but also because Jupiter's second Pokemon, Skuntank. This one is just bad news. Flamethrower deals a ton of damage, it owes a Citrus Berry making it taking even longer to KO, my best move against it is Tackle, which really makes it take longer to KO, and as a little bonus, if I manage to win with just a sliver of health left, I still lose because of its Aftermath ability. So, that was a lot. And the best part is, back in the original games, this fight was way easier. Zubat's best move was Wing Attack, and Skuntank didn't even have a super effective move. So how did I get past this one? Kinda anticlimactic, but really the only way through this without grinding for ages was through luck. Supersonic misses, Poison Fang's poison not proccing, and lucky confusion turns eventually led me past the Zubat with minimal damage taken, fully set up with Curse, and most importantly, without getting poisoned. This is important because if Skuntank sees Squirtle isn't poisoned, it will prioritize Poison Gas, which gives me some precious turns. The first Poison Gas is cured with a held Pecha Berry, and 2 tackles are just about able to take it down, even with Citrus Berry healing. By now you've probably noticed that, as this challenge has progressed, I've pivoted from discussing methods of avoiding particular Pokemon to being more descriptive of singular tough battles that became especially difficult from my self-imposed limitations. However, it wouldn't really be an exaggeration to say that every other battle starting at around the 3rd gym was giving me some sort of trouble. Stalling movesets don't do nearly as well in this challenge as all-out offensive ones, and Torterra's moveset leans more towards the former. Even after getting Earthquake, considering it only has 10 BP, I still need to retreat to a Pokemon Center more often than I would like, and that really inflated the playtime of this game specifically. Thankfully, somewhere after Ventina's gym, Torterra's level started to get high enough that it started outspeeding way more often, making fights way easier. That, combined with some healthy abuse of X items, made for much smoother progression, and even Candice wasn't that much trouble, which is pretty impressive all things considered. And yet, as the 8th gym quickly approaches, the moment we all expected finally showed up. Once again, both these grunts need to be fought at the same time, and once again they prevent you from doing so until you have a second Pokemon in the party. So we are forced to get an old friend from storage to help us through with this roadblock. So I go all the way back to the Pokemon Center, hack the PC, and withdraw... When did I catch a butter for free? Past the required double battle, the story plays out the same as the first time we went through it. We beat Volkner, go through Victory Road easily now that you don't need to have all the gems on your Pokemon to get through it, and get past our rival, the Elite Four, and Cynthia. At the end of it all, thanks to the extra help I called in, we get through the Gen 4 remake while adding only one more Pokémon to the tally. And now join me as we go back in time and witness an old legend. Pokémon Legends Arceus is our next stop, and it presents us with an interesting twist for this challenge. There are no such things as gems in this game once again, so we are free to pick whatever starter we feel like. And while we technically catch all 3 of them in the tutorial section at the beginning, we are catching them for Professor Laventon and don't keep them. So I'm not gonna consider these as catches for the challenge. I will, of course, consider the starter I pick later on, Cyndaquil. I hadn't planned for this originally, but it's the only one of the 3 starters I haven't yet used for this challenge. The tutorials continue for a bit, while the game introduces its unique mechanics. And as we reach the Obsidian Fieldlands for the very first time, our partner helps us out with our first task in the Survey Core. We are given a very challenging task: catching 3 Pokémon. And unlike in the beginning of the game, we keep these Pokémon, so I have to add these to the list. Our new members are a Bidoof, a Starly, and a Shinx. These 3 catches are mandatory, so our Pokémon count for this game skyrockets to 4. And yet, this wouldn't even be that bad compared to the challenge we are faced not too long after this: to reach the first star rank in the Galaxy team. For those who don't know, to reach the different ranks in this game, you need to complete Pokédex entries for the various Pokémon you catch. By completing certain missions assigned to each Pokémon, you gain experience which eventually will allow you to rank up. You can only get this experience for Pokémon you have caught though, so our sources for this are kinda limited right now to the 4 Pokémon we own and their evolutions. And even for these, we cannot complete any of the missions that include catching different quantities, shapes, and forms of these Pokémon. We are limited to the ones we have. Still, as the first star rank only requires 500 experience, we are easily able to clear this goal and continue through our tasks. We can progress to the entirety of the Obsidian Fieldlands, quelling the noble Pokémon Kleavor and earning the right to explore Crimson Mirelands, just as soon as we reach the 2nd star rank. I'm sure you can see a pattern beginning to show up. Thankfully, even though the 2nd rank requires 1800 experience, it's still fairly easy to get since evolving our Pokémon gets us a whole new page of missions to clear. A lot of these are kinda grindy, like use X move 40 times. You'd naturally clear these as you explore the other areas, but we are kinda pressed for time, so we have to cramp all of this training on some lower level Pokémon. The 2nd star rank comes eventually, and we are able to move on to the 2nd area of the game. Just like the previous one, it is pretty unremarkable. Getting through it is only somewhat hampered by my low levels. Usually we will be catching a lot of Pokémon in this game, but since that option is close to me, my avenues for getting experience are severely hampered, especially with the small amount of trainer battles in this game. Even if it's not a smooth trip, I am able to clear all of the Crimson Mirelands, including the Noble Lilligant, and are just about to move on to the next area when... yeah, you know what's coming. The 3rd star rank blocks us from progressing, and this time we need a whole 3500 experience to obtain it. For context, fully completing a Pokédex page, not including the catching missions, usually nets somewhere between 300 and 500 experience, so as you can imagine, we are really starting to hurt for research points right now. I have to grind for levels to get each of my current available Pokémon to their final evolution, and even then their missions only get more and more grindy, so getting to this threshold takes quite a while. Luckily, the Obsidian Fieldlands have an Alpha Blissey available behind a few glitchy Wordeer jumps, and while it's a bit tough to beat it considering its high level, that in turn translates into big experience gains, once I do manage to take it down. And with its help, to my surprise, it is possible to reach this rank exclusively with our party of 4. After who knows how long, we finally reach the 3rd star rank and head to the Cobalt Coastlands. If you were expecting this new area to go as smoothly as the previous ones as I did, brace yourself for a grim reminder of the harshness of this challenge. In order to help Hiscan make a meal for Basculegion, we needed Dusclops in our possession. That's a significant problem, for which the only solution appears to be catching one. However, we do have one possibility open to us: transferring one from a previous game. Now, I haven't caught a Dusclops at any point in any playthrough so far, but that doesn't mean I couldn't have. I have basically been catching random Pokemon whenever one is mandatory, so if any of the Pokemon in our list could be replaced with a Dusclops, I could retroactively change it and prevent us adding a Pokemon in this instance. So we just need to ignore any Pokemon in generations where we only caught one, since we wouldn't be able to take them off their respective games, remove Pokemon that are forced encounters or catches, including starters, and remove Pokemon from games where Dusclops is not catchable. And we get... oh, that's unfortunate. We really have no other recourse in this situation, so all we can do is make the best out of a bad situation and instead catch a Duskull. If we do that, we can clear the task on its page for a little more research experience, and after doing that, we can get it to level 37 and evolve it into a Dusclops to proceed with the story. Regardless, that's another Pokemon added. The rest of Cobalt Coastlands goes swimmingly, pun intended. Another royal Pokemon calmed, another marine area cleared. The Coronet Highlands loom tall in the distance, and to be allowed to reach for them will require determination and grit, the power to move past life's hardships and persevere past all challenge. It's star rank 4, honestly I don't know what you expected. Sadly, this brings us to the issue I've been trying to delay all this time. To reach the 4th star rank, I need a total of 6,000 research points. By my count, if I get all of the points I can from the Pokemon I own, including our new member, I can reach at most 5,580 research points. We're a measly 420 points away, which almost seems like a cruel joke, honestly. And you think that's bad? Then let me go ahead and spoil to you that we'll need to reach up to the 5th star rank eventually to gain access to the last area. I'll need 8,500 to obtain that rank, which raises the value I'm currently lacking up to 2,920 points. It's hard to know how many extra Pokemon I'd need based on that number alone. Each Pokemon has a variable number of research points they provide with the Pokédex entries, and some of them have more missions related to catching than others, which are obviously blocked off to me. Now, an insane person would make a program to analyze every single Pokemon available in the game and quantify how many research points they would give in the specific context of this challenge. Thankfully, I'm completely out of my mind. Boom! Data, baby! This list assigns every Pokemon with how many research points they provide if raised from their first evolution, ignoring any catching research missions that can't be gotten in this challenge, and only considering the ones that can once. This gives us some interesting info, like, for example, that Starly and Bidoof are one of the worst sources of research points in this game for us, which makes it really unfortunate that we are forced to catch them. Staravia is also the worst second stage Pokemon in the game for this purpose, but that's besides the point. What we want to know is the biggest scorers of the group. On 3rd place, we have Rhyperior, with 1,340 total research points between its 3 evolutions. In 2nd, is a tie between the final evolutions of the 3 starters, with 1,350 points each. And in 1st place, with a clean 1,400 points, Machamp takes the crown as the highest scoring Pokemon in the game in terms of research points. Congratulations, that's really impressive. What are we doing this for again? Right, so considering we need a total of 2,920 points to reach the final area, that means that even if we get both a Machop and a second starter, we'd still be 170 points short from the 5th rank. That means that we'd need a bare minimum of 3 new Pokemon to be able to finish the game. Not the happiest conclusion to take from all that work, but all is not yet lost. We still have one more trick up our sleeves. That's right, it didn't work the first time, but maybe by looking through the list of Pokemon we've used so far, we'll get some good ideas. Now, same thing I mentioned before applies. If we just took the list as it is now, we wouldn't get very far, as I didn't have the foresight to predict this conundrum showing up, so I didn't particularly plan for it. However, if we identify some changes in these teams that keep them consistent to the restrictions of each game, I can retroactively change them to what they need to be. I'll also consider our smallest pool of Pokémon, that is, the list of Pokémon we used, including glitches. So, what do we have to work with? Like before, let's start by eliminating what we definitely can change. That means games we beat with only a single Pokémon, starters from games that don't share them with Legends Arceus, and other forced Pokémon that aren't in this game's Pokédex. I'm also excluding Simipour. There are no Pokémon obtainable in Pokémon Black or White, up to the forced double battle in that game, that also appear in Legends Arceus, so we won't be able to turn it into anything useful. And finally, between Black and Black 2, I'll only need the opportunity to take one of the starters, so I'll take out Samurott for now. From the 10 Pokémon that remain, I'll only be able to take one from the GameCube games. That's because I have to trade them into Emerald to get them into Generation 4 and beyond. And since we only have 2 Pokémon in that game, we'll only ever be able to take one of them out. I could also use Leaf Green for it, but I have a better idea for the second slot there. That gives us a total of 7 possible changes to the list. Let's go through them one by one and figure out what Pokémon would best fit them. In Leaf Green, we could swap Nidoqueen with any Pokémon that knows Cut. There are only 2 evolution lines in the game that both learn Cut and are available in both games, the Paras line and the Tentacruel line. And according to my program, Parasect outscores Tentacruel by 50 points, so Paras is the best candidate. In Heart Gold, we are forced to pick up Togepi, but not to evolve it, so we are easily able to just keep it as a Togepi through the entire adventure. The change for Pokémon Black is obvious, just pick Oshawott. He is able to learn Cut, so we'll still be able to get through the Dreamyard tree. This also has the unintended side effect of changing the elemental monkey we get from Pampur to Pansear, but that doesn't impact the rest of the game. For Black 2, we have a bunch of Pokémon we are able to pick. Cross-referencing the available pool of Pokémon with the output from my program, a Zubat from Castilia Sewers and a Magmi from Verbank Complex seem like the best picks. Actually, Electivire outscores Magmortar by a whole 50 points, but they are only available in Pokémon White 2, so we have to make do. In Pokémon Sun, again, we can simply never evolve Rowlet to be able to get as many research points out of it as possible. And finally, out of the 4 Pokémon in GameCube games, keeping Teddiursa evolved gets us another 3-stage Pokémon. These changes keep the previous games possible to beat, while giving us Pokémon that we're able to farm for research points in Legends Arceus. And while keeping Pokémon unevolved makes the original games more difficult, we are always able to trade more powerful Pokémon from previous games, or just transfer them all together in the later games. Still, it shouldn't be too bad. Games before Generation 6 are easy to overlevel our way through, and in the games after we are able to transfer all our Pokémon to them, minimizing increases in challenge. So, time to play through all of them again. Wait, what? Who are you? Hey, I'm you from the future. Oh my god, are you here to help the future resistance against the tyrannical overlord? Nope. Oh, are you gonna give me the lottery numbers then? Nuh-uh. You wanna make out, or? I'm here to help you on this very specific challenge. Alright, this bit has gone on for too long, just get to the point. Oh, right, just check your pastures. My pastures? Okay, Wait, what's all this? Where'd you get all these Pokemon? You don't wanna know. Alright, have fun. Wait, you can't just... and he's gone. Well, I guess it won't hurt to use this Pokemon for now. They come from future me, after all. There's no way you collect all these in the future, though. Right? Well, no use thinking about this now. What's important is that between all these Pokemon we just got and their evolutions, there's 14 new Pokédex pages we can fill. According to my program, that's around 5,810 research points, which is way over the 2,920 that we needed for the 5th star rank. Time to research the heck out of these bad boys. That was honestly way more effort than I expected. But I finally reached the 4th star rank, and with it I gained access to the Coronet Highlands. Turns out going around in circles spamming the same moves over and over again on the same low-level Pokemon is unbelievably boring. And that wasn't even the worst of it. To evolve the trade evolutions in this game without actually trading them, you have to buy their evolution items using merit points that you get by retrieving pouches from other players that you find out in the wild. The thing is, only a small amount of these spawn at a time, and they take real-life hours to respawn. So when I say that evolving these Pokemon took days, I mean that literally. The trip through the new area is surprisingly short. Since I'm basically going from objective to objective without caring about catching Pokémon, you can get done with a new area really quickly. So, after quelling the noble Pokémon here, we can move ahead and... Oh no, not again, I just got done doing so much grind. Alabaster Icelands is our next stop after attaining the 5th star rank, and I'm done with it pretty quickly after defeating the gigantic Avalugg that protects the land. From there, the story kicks up, and we are sent all over the areas we've previously gone through until we end up near the peak of Mount Coronet, right in front of the Temple of Sinnoh, ready to confront our destiny. And in this case, our destiny is, once again, a last-second forced legendary catch. Catching the legendary that shows up here is mandatory, and it corresponds to the tribe leader that we picked earlier in the game. Since I picked Irida, Palkia becomes the 6th mandatory catch for Legends Arceus. Oh well, at least we're done here. We're breaking new ground here, I see. Legends Arceus doesn't have just one forced legendary catch right at the end of the game, it has 2. The remaining legendary shows up in its origin form, and after a climatic fight, it gets caught in a cutscene and added to our team. The credits roll not too late after that, which makes the total smallest amount of Pokémon needed to beat Legends Arceus rise up to 7. Easily the most we've had up to this point. And we're finally here at the last currently released games in the series, Pokémon Scarlet and Pokémon Violet. It's been a long road and it seems like we've seen it all, but there are still some fine points to be discussed here, not the least of which is my choice of starter. Looking at the starter types I've picked throughout this challenge, the clear favorite is the water type, with 9 overall starters chosen due to their usefulness for learning watery gems in the older games. Apart from that, fire and grass types share the same number of entries, 6, if you include Flareon, an X and Y second starter that is. So I looked further back into the total number of Pokémon from either type. The only Pokémon part of either category was Reshiram, so I wrapped up my needlessly complicated selection process by picking Sprigatito. As we go through the starting section of the game, I like to touch upon the consequences of my actions. To be more precise, I'm referring to the ground rules of this whole challenge. In the very first episode, I mentioned that my goal is to, and I quote, go through one game from each of the current 9 generations, and that I'd collect all 8 badges in the games that have them. There is an issue that arises from this definition though, and it rears its head right at the end of this challenge. In this game, you have 3 different paths to choose from. In one of them, you do indeed beat all 8 gyms, go through the Elite Four and fight the champion, but it's up to interpretation if clearing that path counts as beating the game. Plus, there's a whole section that goes on at Area 0 after you clear all 3 paths. Does that also count? Where to draw the line between mandatory and optional? Had I the foresight to predict this issue back when I first started this challenge, I'd probably have included some rules just to handle this, but honestly I never expected to come this far. So here's the solution I'm going with. I'll add the Pokémon needed to complete the Victory Road storyline to the list as normal, and any extra Pokémon needed for other paths will get added as optional Pokémon, the same way I included Pokémon needed to beat the games without glitches. Hopefully this is a nice middle ground. You can make your own decisions on whether this counts or not with a glance at the list. All this preamble aside, taking on the Victory Road storyline is absurdly anticlimactic. There are no rampaging legendaries that need to be caught to be calmed, no overly generous scientists gifting us weather-altering Pokémon, and no shadow Pokémon begging to be rescued. Going to each town, beating its gym leader is more straightforward than ever and can even be done in any order. There is only one little matter to address though, and it comes from our good old friend, the forced double battle. I hope you've missed them because the Montenevera gym trainers will demand a double battle and will not take no for an answer. We are thankfully already quite used to these demands and have Pokémon Home as a convenient escape from them. Bringing in another extra Pokémon from another game, we are able to get through not only this battle, but every other gym that stands in our way. A fight with the Elite Four, the champion, and Nemona later, and the Victory Road section of this game is complete, all while catching one single Pokémon. My job isn't quite done yet, however. There are still 3 more stories to explore, beginning with the Path of Legends. This one has you going around the region battling the different Titan Pokémon, to restore the power of the legendary you obtained at the start of the game. There's not much to point out here, it really is as simple as defeating all of the 5 Titan Pokémon, plus the fight with Arven at the end. None of these battles require any extra Pokémon, so we can easily proceed. I can't say the same about the third route we have to go through, Starfall Street. Team Star are troublemakers, even for such a simplistic challenge such as this. The raids you do on their bases are the root cause, because you aren't allowed in without having 3 Pokémon in your party. The first time 3 Pokémon have been required ever since the Force Triple Battle back in Black and White 2. Thankfully, there's nothing stopping me from simply getting another pal from Pokémon Home, and that's all I need to begin making my way through all these bases. One by one, all 5 of the Team Star bases are taken down, and all that's left is beating Director Clavel and Penny to complete the last of the 3 main paths in the games. Now to bring it all home. The final section of the game has me traveling to the depths of Area Zero to discover the secrets hidden within, and it's mostly uneventful as far as this challenge is concerned, save for, wait for it, a section right at the very end. Okay, so let's talk about Koraidon. At the start of the game, you obtain its Pokeball, and you can summon him as a ride Pokemon to carry you through the region on its back. At that point you could argue we have caught Koraidon and added it to our party, but you can't use it in battle and it isn't a part of your party, so I decided to just treat it as an overgrown bike, since mechanically that's what it is. In the last fight of the game, however, you unlock the ability to use it in battle. You can add it to your party and use it generally everywhere you could use a normal Pokemon, with the only difference being you can neither box it nor trade it. So do I consider it a caught Pokemon or not? It almost feels like an exact middle point between the two. I can add it to my party, but I can also remove it. I can't trade it, but I can battle with it. In the end, I defaulted back to my words in the very first video. If it takes up space in party or box, then it counts. Even if you can remove it later, Koraidon demonstrably has the ability to take up space in the party, and as such, I'll count it as the second Pokemon required to beat Pokémon Scarlet. That makes the total amount 2. 1 to beat the Victory Road Path, and 1 more to get to the credits. Well, I can't put it off any longer. It's time to experience this challenge in the game most hostile to it so far. Time to bring an end to this, whatever the cost. Time for Pokémon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. These remakes of the original Pokémon Yellow were created right off the heels of the runaway success of Pokémon Go, and were designed to be heavily inspired by it. We'll go over exactly what that means for this challenge a little later, but for now, we'll add into the list the starter for these games, which is Pikachu or Eevee, depending on which game you have. These aren't your average Pikachu and Eevee either. Their stats have been super boosted, and they get access to some pretty ridiculous moves, which is nice since we'll hopefully have to keep them on our party for most of the game. But if there's one thing I learned, it's that good news never lasts in this challenge, and that's especially true in this game. For the moment we set foot in the first gym, we get introduced to a new feature only present in these games: gym requirements. Most gyms in this game have a specific requirement for you to be able to even enter them, and in the case of the first gym, that requirement is owning a grass or water type Pokémon. Neither Pikachu or Eevee fit this description, and the Eevee you get as a starter in this game cannot evolve, so Vaporeon and Leafeon are out of the question too. Plus, we are unable to ask for help from one of our previous friends. Only Pokémon caught in a Let's Go game can be transferred into them, so none of our other Pokémon are able to be brought in. That's unfortunately all our options thrown right off the table, except for one: actually catching a Pokémon. With no other choice, and with no other types available before this point, we have 2 picks for grass types, Bellsprout and the rare Bulbasaur. Since we get access to Mega Stones later in the game, I spent some time and a lure to catch a Bulbasaur. With a grass type in tow, we are allowed into the gym, and from there we can proceed. There wasn't much of note as I progressed through the game. Eevee is plenty strong enough to power through every battle in the game, especially after getting its broken moves. There's one for each evolution type, all of them are 90 power, and they all have amazing side effects, such as absorbing health, guaranteed paralysis, or setting screens, so needless to say we aren't lacking in power. As for the gym requirements, they ease up a little after the first one. They devolve into pretty simple things like having a Pokémon at level 15, having a cute Pokémon, catching 50 different Pokémon, having a level 45 Pokémon. Wait, what was that? Oh. So as you can imagine, 50 Pokémon is a rather substantial amount. Heck, it's almost double the amount of Pokémon we currently have in our list. And as I mentioned before, there's no getting any help from our reserves in Pokémon Home, so we have to catch all of these entirely within this game. Now, I know this sounds bad, and to be frank, it is, but there's some light at the end of the tunnel. By caught here, the game means registered to the Pokédex. It's using the definition of caught as it commonly appears in the save screen, where if you evolve a Pokémon, the game assumes it's a new Pokémon caught, even though it's the same one. So the actual number of Pokémon will be substantially less than 50, though not enough for it not to sting. Complaining about it won't do me any good though, so let's get our hands dirty and figure out exactly how many Pokémon we're talking about here. So, to recap, we need to figure out the least amount of Pokémon we can catch to get at least 50 Pokédex hits. A great place to start is our starter. We are forced to get a Pikachu or Eevee at the start of the game, and since they don't evolve, that's a single Pokémon taken off the counter. There are no other absolutely forced catches though, so our next stop should be Pokémon with 2 evolutions, since they count for 3 Pokédex logs, which is as good as it gets. These games contain exclusively Generation 1 Pokémon, ignoring evolutions and pre-evolutions introduced in later games, so the Pokémon we have access to that fit this category are the 3 original starters, the 2 early bug types, Pidgey, Bellsprout, Oddish, the Nidos, Poliwag, the 4 trait evolutions, and Dratini. That's 16 in total, which would translate into 48 Pokédex entries. Unfortunately, it's not that simple. A lot of these are impossible for us to get. For example, Bellsprout and Oddish are version exclusives for Let's Go Eevee and Pikachu respectively, so we only have access to one of them. On the other hand, since the trait evolution required, as the name implies, to be traded to evolve, we could only get one evolution out of them with only one game. That begs the question, so why don't I use 2 games? If I play through Let's Go Pikachu as well, even though I'd have to get one extra Pokémon in the form of the starter Pikachu, that would easily be offset by gaining access to all these Pokédex entries. My reasons are twofold. On one hand, I've been only running through one Pokémon game in each generation/remake, and breaking the rule here would be giving Let's Go games an unfair advantage. On the other, I only have one Switch, so I wouldn't even be able to do it if I wanted. So I'm limiting myself to only one Let's Go game for this, and that means that the 48 potential Pokédex entries get reduced down to 41. That's still a fairly big chunk out of the count. With 8 entries to go still, our next best bet is Pokémon with only 1 evolution, of which we'll need 4. There are plenty more than that available in the game, so we're free to pick whichever are easiest. And yet, I feel drawn to a specific set of them. Vulpix, Pikachu, Rhyhorn, and Magnemite. I can't exactly put my finger on it, but it feels to me like I should really go with this 4. I wonder why. And that's it. Altogether, that's 20 different Pokémon. These games are very open, even more than the original games, so by the time we reach Fuchsia, we have access to basically the entire map, and more importantly, every Pokémon. So the only thing left to do is to get our hands dirty. Right at the start, we get our Eevee, given to us by Professor Oak. Shortly after that, we reach Viridian Forest, where we go on a catching spree. Altogether, we catch 5 Pokémon, both early bugs, Pikachu, Bellsprout, and Bulbasaur. You might be asking why I haven't caught a Pidgey yet, since it's available both here and even before this in Route 2. The answer to that is actually pretty simple. It's the problem that has only grown bigger as we progress through this challenge. Experience. To bring these games closer to Pokémon Go, while Pokémon encounters are fundamentally different, you are not allowed to battle Pokémon here, only catch them. In fact, catching Pokémon is the main means of getting experience in these games. The experience wheels of trainer battles are exceptionally meager. Trainer battles are also finite, there are no rematches, so the total experience we have access to seems pretty limited. Due to all of this, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that leveling up in this game without catching Pokémon is the hardest it has ever been. We can offset this a bit by making sure to get as much experience from the catches we do make, by getting as many multipliers as possible. That includes going for small or large Pokémon, getting excellent catches, and making catches with a second player. Still, even with that, experience is hard to come by. Because of that, catching higher level Pokémon is advantageous to us. The least we have to level up our newly caught Pokémon for them to evolve, the better. PG gets its last evolution at level 36, so if we catch it here, we'd have to pump over 30 levels worth of experience into it. If we are able to catch level 34 PG though, we'd only need to level it up twice to get both its evolutions. So I'm gonna try to catch Pokémon as close to their final evolution levels as possible. This doesn't apply to any Pokémon I've caught so far, all of them are only available in Viridian Forest, except for Bellsprout, but we'll have a free spot in our party for a bit and it evolves early enough, so it's simpler if we just catch it here. Okay, back to the route. We don't catch any Pokémon between the first and second gyms, but when we first get to Route 25, we take the chance to nab a Squirtle. On our way down Route 6 towards Vermilion, we grab a Vulpix and an Abra, which spawn just a Firestone or a few levels away from evolving. After getting through Lieutenant Surge, we get access to Route 9, where we catch both Nidos. Catching them here means they evolve straight away, and with the Moonstones we get from Mount Moon, we get 6 Pokédex entries super quickly. As Route 9 leads into Route 10, the Rock Tunnel beckons, and with it comes a bunch of Pokémon only available here. Namely, we catch a Rhyhorn, Charmander, Geodude, and Machop. Some of these are pretty far away from evolving. Rhyhorn particularly will need at least 20 levels worth, but this is the only place we can catch them. We do make a quick detour to Celadon to meet Erika and get the Sylph Scope, and bring it back to Lavender, so we can detect and catch a Ghastly. With it in our party, we return to Celadon and take the west exit this time, making our way down Route 17 and getting a high level PG for our troubles, only 2 levels away from a Pidgeot. We arrive at Fuchsia, but we aren't able to enter the gym quite yet. We go there for a different reason, and that is to get the Sea-Skimmed secret technique, which opens up the rest of the map for us and, more importantly, a couple of necessary catches. Namely, we backtrack to Route 25 to catch a Poliwag, to the power plant to nab a Magnemite, and just outside it on Route 10 to get a Dratini. This is the only place where they spawn and they are level 23 at most, which makes the trek to a Dragonite at level 55 pretty daunting. That's all the Pokémon we need successfully captured, but a handful of them still need to get to their final evolutions, so I take the chance to head over to Cinnabar and beat Blaine and get the last bits of experience available to us. At the end of this whole journey, we are still a ways away. Between Rhyhorn and Dragonair, I'm almost 30 levels shy from their final forms. There are a few trainers scattered around, but I don't think they will be able to get me over that hump. So it feels like we have hit a dead end, with no choice but to catch Pokémon to supply us with the experience we need. There are, however, a couple of avenues left for us. First, there's feint training. When you lose to a trainer, you keep the experience gained from any Pokémon we defeat. So one choice is to pick a trainer with a good experience yield and continuously knock out all but one of their Pokémon, then feint to the last one. As you can imagine though, this is an unbearably tedious process. You have to go from the closest Poké Center to their location every time, you have to wait for however much time it takes for the trainer's last Pokémon to knock out your entire party, if it is even able to do that, and all that for a meager amount of experience. Although possible, I'm looking for a strategy where I don't die of old age ideally, and lucky for me, I found just the thing. Hidden items are a mainstay of Pokémon games. As the name suggests, they are items that are completely invisible until we interact with them, and as a result, they tend to be pretty useful. In the Let's Go games they return, but with a pretty important distinction, they respawn. An item picked up might show up again in the next day, and this applies to most hidden items in the game. This is the case for this hidden item right here in the top corner of Route 6, a rare candy. So we are able to come back to this spot every day, and eventually we'll have enough rare candies to level Rhydon and Dragonair up until they evolve. But I'm impatient, so let's speed up the clock a bit. Though this isn't as easy as just setting the Switch's time to the next day, the game seems to know the clock got changed manually. Thankfully, I found this Reddit post by Towering Redwood with a way to get around this. You simply need to head to the communicate menu and start a local trade. While the trade is ongoing, then you go and simply change the Switch date. Then all you need is to go back to the game and cancel the trade. For this rare candy, I got about a 50% success rate, which I reckon is the respawn rate for this item. Still, that's perfectly acceptable, and a few minutes later, I obtained all the rare candies I needed to get the last 2 Pokédex entries. With 50 total Pokémon registered to the Pokédex, I return to the Fuchsia gym, begrudgingly display my bare minimum collection, and then proceed to beat down Koga to get the 7th badge. The 8th gym is a quick hop away, and from there to the Indigo Plateau is a cakewalk with an overpowered Eevee and a Dragonite on our team. A fight with each member of the Elite Four and our rival later, and we at long last arrive at the end of our journey, not before adding an unprecedentedly large amount of Pokémon to the list. With this being the last game, I can say for certain that the Let's Go games have the biggest requirement of caught Pokémon with a grand total of 20. But before wrapping it up, I'd like to bring up an additional point. What if I allowed myself to use Let's Go Pikachu as well? Believe it or not, that would result in the ground shattering one less Pokémon needed to beat the game. I'll explain. By using Let's Go Pikachu, we are forced right off the bat to add one Pokémon that we can't trade, in the form of the starter Pikachu. This may feel like it's strictly disadvantageous, but it more than makes up for it. As a start, we can catch Oddish, which gives us one more entry than a Pokémon with just one evolution. And secondly, it allows us to evolve the trait evolutions, which is 4 more Pokédex logs. That would allow the game to be beaten with only 19 Pokémon, the starter Pikachu and Eevee, the 16 2 evolution Pokémon, and a random extra Pokémon to round it out, because remember that Pikachu cannot be transferred over to Let's Go Eevee. Again, I'm only allowing running one game for this challenge, but for the theoretical lowest amount of Pokémon, you'd have to run both versions. Long last, we finally have our answer. How many Pokemon do you need to beat the Pokémon franchise? A grand total of 59 Pokemon at the very least by using glitches to aid you on your way, and 64 by playing legitimately all the way through. Yes, we really got 64 right at the end. It seems like Nintendo's influence really shines through. So now that we stand right here at the end, let's do some analysis on our final results. First, what would happen if I wasn't allowed the use of Pokemon Bank and Pokemon Home? In total, we'd have to add one more Pokemon to Alpha Sapphire, one to Sun, one to Ultra Moon, one to Sword, one to Brilliant Diamond, 2 to Scarlet, and at least 3 to Legends Arceus, for a total of 10 extra Pokemon. That will put the full count at 74 Pokemon and the count with glitches at... Seriously? 69, we're really doing this? I'm not making this up, this is the number I got. I've been working on this for like a year and this is what I get. We ended this challenge with 6 duplicates. We got all 3 original starters twice, between the Gen 1 games, their remakes, the extra starter in X and Y, and getting all 3 of them again in Let's Go. They are mostly interchangeable, except for the very first one, where we have to pick Charmander for the water walking glitch. That means that theoretically, I could have gotten a Charizard 5 whole times in total, making it the Pokemon that can show up the most in this challenge, just in case it needed to be more popular than it already is. The other 4 duplicates are 2 for Alligators, though you could use any starter for the glitch run by Gen 2, Togepi and its evolutions, though Togekiss is exclusive to the Gen 4 remakes, and finally Swampert. A total of 6 games were beat while only catching one Pokémon. Pokémon Red, Silver, Pearl, Ultra Moon, Brilliant Diamond, and Scarlet. Without the use of glitches, that count goes down to 3, and if you want to go all the way to the credits, only Ultramoon and Brilliant Diamond remain, though both of those are only possible due to Pokémon Bank and Home respectively. On the other hand, 4 games need a total of 3 catches to be beaten, 1 needs 7, and of course, Let's Go Eevee stands far above the others with its 20 required Pokémon. There are a total of 8 required legendaries, 5 of them obtained in the final moments of their respective games. And finally, we caught the mascot Pikachu a single time, and technically we didn't even need to, so even if you play through every generation, you might not have caught a Pikachu a single time in your whole life, despite possibly catching 5 Charizards. And that's it! As of recording this video, Legends ZA still has no release date, so for now, this is where this challenge ends. As for me, now that I have the answer to my needlessly complicated question, I think I'll start looking into time travel. I've got an idea that just might work.
Hey, welcome to the end of the video. I don't want to take much more of your guys' time. I just want to mention that I really appreciate your guys' patience with this video. I hope it was worth the wait. I already have a bunch of ideas for what the next one's gonna be. I have some ideas for Pokemon games, some other non-Pokemon games, some other variety thrown in. So I hope you guys look forward to it. It definitely won't take as much time as this one, at least I hope so. So I'll see you back here soon. Until then, take care.